Hey everyone, welcome back to Pete Punch Beef Gaming, and in this video I'm going to do something a little bit different. This video I'm going to really focus on not only kind of unboxing the new Shadowlands Daredevil and Electra and Hand Ninja set, which is a very cool set, but I'm not going to focus so much on what's on the sprue and what's on the minis. What I'm going to do is do a little bit of a build tutorial. I have found that a number of my friends are getting into Marvel Crisis Protocol because they love Marvel, quite frankly. But either they're not familiar with miniatures games, or they're coming back to the hobby after a long hiatus, or whatever the case may be. They're just asking a lot of fundamental questions that I think as a hobby gamer, you take it for granted. What type of super glues do I buy? How do I clip a model out of a sprue? What happens if a piece breaks? How do I avoid losing pieces? What do I do with what tools do I need? What clippers do I need? Files? Do I need X-Acto knives? What do I do? How do I do it? How much glue do I put on? And so today I'm going to focus on those fundamentals while unboxing these Hand Ninjas, Electra, and Shadowlands Daredevil. Very cool models all told, so I hope you enjoy this different video today, and I look forward to sharing some of my hobby techniques. All right, let's get to it. So here it is. This is the Shadowland Daredevil and Electra set that just came out a couple days ago by Atomic Mass Games. And as I mentioned previously, we're going to do a little bit of an unboxing, but more specifically what we're going to do today is take a look at how to assemble the miniatures and maybe do a little bit of a step-by-step on each one of these. So let's go ahead and get this thing open right now. So the first thing I do when I'm getting these guys open is I decide whether or not I want to keep the box art, or if I'll just go ahead and use like a digital resource to take a look at the different pictures of the art for painting the models later. And I think, honestly, if I was going to keep it, what I would do is I don't like keeping all of the entirety of the box itself. So generally, I'll just cut out, if I want to work off of it, I'll just go ahead and cut out the front art panel and save it as a reference for later. And, you know, you don't have to do anything too fancy with it. As you can see, I'm just kind of cutting across here so that I've got it available to me. And then I will just work my way down. And there you go. Now I've got something to take a look at. I can pitch the rest, save a little bit of space on my hobby shelf, so I'm not storing empty cardboard boxes. And there you go, reference material. Now, let's take a look at what I do next when I'm assembling miniatures. First thing is I take a look at the instructions and see what they have here. And this right here, what you're seeing is the kind of the special rules for grunts, but they'll also have typically, here's where you can find the assembly instructions if you're up against the wall, you're not sure what you're doing. And I don't know if I'm going to need those yet, but there's no harm, no foul in digging those out. So I recommend always breaking this out first and seeing what they've got to show you here. Not saying anything too critical. I'm going to set this aside for now. Now, for the new players out there, or the new hobbyists out there, the next thing I do is inspect the models and see what I've got going on. Make sure I've got all the parts and pieces. So I know that I'm going to need, looking at the box art, I'm going to need one large base and two of the smaller bases. Check, I've got it. Here's 4 bases. I can pick and choose. Whatever base suits your fancy will be fine here. None of them matter in terms of you know, size or anything like that. This is all the same if you're using it for Electra or Shadowlands Daredevil. You'll want to use one of the two of these if you are when you're putting together the Hand Ninjas. Now let's take a look at the sprues. The sprues are divided up into 3 different things here in total. What you've got is the first one looks like this is probably Shadowlands Daredevil, and it is. You can see his head, we've got his legs, nothing looks broken there. It all looks fairly self-explanatory. It looks like they've got kind of a peg system. All right, so that's going to be pretty reasonable to put together. Next, we've got the hand ninjas. So this is going to be a tricky piece right here. You can see that it's a three-dimensional chain, and when you clip these out of the sprue, you're going to want to be really careful because this is very fragile and can break if you're not mindful. Looking for any other gotchas, perhaps this katana is in the same boat. You can see there's a little bit of a belt that's hanging off here, kind of that three-dimensional space. That shouldn't be a problem because there's no stress points when you clip it. And everything else appears to be there. And that's kind of a cool smoke effect, but that won't impact anything. All right, now let's take a look at Elektra. Elektra, this I think will be okay because we can clip down there. That's for her headband. You can see her head actually comes in a number of different parts. You've got the hair, you've got the headband. The face is actually attached to the arm here, if you can see that. So that's kind of a peculiar look. It can be kind of intimidating. Looks like the legs go there, there's the body, there's a sash, but everything's intact. The one thing I will note of the size themselves, those are very delicate, very, very thin. So we'll have to be really mindful when we put those together and make sure that we don't goof that up. All right, so it looks like the model itself is intact. We'll pause real quick here and let's take a look at the cards and make sure we've got everything for that. All right, now going into here, we'll get out all the rules essentially. So again, if you're new to Marvel Crisis Protocol or miniatures gaming in general, you will get oftentimes these reference type cards. A lot of games have them to show what the rules are and what they look like. And really, for the purposes of this unboxing, we're not going to go over the rules a whole lot. I just want to show you the contents here and what we've got. You can see that we've got 5 of these tactics cards, and we'll take a deeper look at those in just a moment. We've got the hand ninjas, we've got Daredevil, we have Electra. All of this has been spoiled already by Atomic Mass Games. And then we've got our tokens here. It looks like we've got some energy, some damage, and then specific tokens for probably their tactics cards. Now, the one thing that might prove useful in this case is you can always take a look at the instructions and make sure you've got everything that you're expecting coming out of the box here. And actually, it's not going to be on the instructions. My apologies. It will be on the back of the box that we cut up here. So we've got the Shadowlands Daredevil miniature, we've got Electra, we've got the hand ninjas, we've got our bases. You can see it says 3 bases. We got plenty. Atomic Mass Games is very generous with their bases. So we've got plenty of bases, 1 big, 2 smalls with the referencing. We've got the 3 character stat cards, there's Daredevil, Electra, and the hand ninjas. Different unique size. That's causing some conversation in the Atomic Mass Games community. I don't personally think it's an issue. I think it's just fine. And then we're looking for our 5 teams tactics cards, which we've got, and the 8 tokens. So we have a complete set here, which is always a victory. Generally, if you're short one, you can always email the company, and most companies, I haven't met one yet that is a stickler about that. They're usually pretty good at making sure you get everything. So these are the damage sides. For those that are interested, I'm just going to put up the healthy sides so that you all can take a look. You can pause the video here if you want a good hard look at what these characters do. They're both 4 power. And here's the damage sides. So you can take a look. You can pause it here, get a good read on them. And then again, for unboxing purposes, I will go ahead and just show these teams tactics cards that we've got here. Most of these are Criminal Syndicate. Looks like 3 of the 5 with 2 unaffiliated. These are your unaffiliated ones. Here's our Criminal Syndicate right here. As always, the art on these is tremendous. I love what they're doing. They probably borrowed it from comic books, but I really appreciate the fact that they take the time and they do that. Very well done, Atomic Mass Games. Okay. Now, let's really get on to kind of the intent of this video. I'm going to put away these cards, and I'm going to talk a little bit about assembling a miniature. And I'm just going to take the first one that we've got here, and this is Daredevil. Daredevil is a pretty small sprue. There's not a whole ton of stuff going on right here. But let's talk about the tools if you're new to modeling. So set Daredevil just up here to the top. The first thing you'll want is a hobby knife. And if you can, try and get a new blade. If you're a youngster, please use the blade with your parents. This is good for taking off like little burrs and things like that off the model. We'll show you later. But this is one important piece of kit. Remember to always cut away from yourself. Got that. The next item I want to show you is, this is a mold line scraper. And you might say, hey, Chris, what's a mold line scraper? The mold line scraper is a tool specifically designed that when these plastic miniatures come out of the sprue, oftentimes the way they're formed, they'll have a little tiny mold line on them. And you can run that, and I'll try and show you here, against the model, and we'll do it here as we assemble some of these, to scrape off the mold line here. So that's really what this mold line scraper. Now, I will say I got this out of a Games Workshop Start Painting bundle. You don't have to have one of these specifically. You can use a hobby knife for that. Just want to be careful. The nice thing about these is there's no sharp edges. They're just some hard edges to them so that you can take off whatever mold lines you have. So that's your mold line tool. The next item that we're going to look at are a good pair of hobby clippers. So this is a set by Army Painter. Games Workshop makes them. The one thing to note is they've got a flush side, which you can see right here where it's flat. And then you've got the rounded side here. And it's important that when you're clipping the model out, you use the flush side against the actual model itself that you're looking to clip out. And I'll show you what I mean by that when we clip out Daredevil. So we'll set that aside. Now, the last thing that you've got are glue. I use, generally speaking, this Maxi Cure hobby glue. You can get this at really any hobby store out there. It doesn't have to be a game store specifically, although a lot of good ones will carry it. And you'll notice the thing that I've got here, it says extra thick on it. Extra thick is important to me because I find that thin glue, liquid glues, run all over the place and they're really hard to control. It's not to say that you can't control them. There are some people who prefer them, but I like thicker glue, and because I can control it better. There's several different brands that you can get. This is a Gorilla Glue, and I really like Gorilla Glue as well. Again, this is I think a hobby glue specifically, and you know, you squeeze the sides here and just a touch of glue will come out. And the one thing, and I'm going to repeat this more than once, but the one thing that's really important to know about hobby glue or super glue is a little bit goes a long way. So you don't need a lot of this when you're building your model. Not at all. And there's tons of different brands. So find one that you like. This, you can't go wrong with this. You can't go wrong with that. But again, I recommend gels, something that's thick. Okay. Now that we've got the tools out of the way, or at least the bare minimum tools out of the way, let's go ahead and clip out Daredevil. So the first thing I do is I always think about what's my build strategy here? How am I going to put this together? And if you're not working off the instructions like I am today, I generally will start with the torso, the body itself, because it's something to build on completely. More complex models like the Electra model, we might do something different here, but we'll start with Daredevil. And you can notice that you'll see small numbers there. There's a 3, then we've got a 2. So usually that's a pretty good hint that pieces that go together. So for the legs, we've got 6, and we've got 7, and then you've got 4 and 5 for the arms. 8 is the head, and I bet money that 1 is the head and 8 is the base. So there you go. That's what that looks like. All right, so let's go ahead and start that. Now, remember I said flush side again. So see that flat side? See how it lays flat? What we're going to do is we'll start with a torso, and I'm going to lay the flat side against the base, or against the piece itself. And you notice I don't have it like all the way on there like this. I just have the basics on there. And I am going to clip the flush side, again, the flush side of the clippers against the model. Because what it does is, you can see, generally speaking, it does a cleaner cut against the model so that you don't have as much flash or mold lines to trim off later. That's the point of going with the flat side. So we've got torso 1, and now torso number 2. And we're just going to use that flat side again, and we're clipping that out. Now, I'm not going to clip out all the pieces. And the reason for that is simple but important. And that is, when you're working with models, it's easy to lose them. And they're gray. And if you've got, unless you've got like a bright red carpet or something, once you lose these things, you're not finding it again. And you lose a torso and you're having to buy a whole new model. So before I clean up this model, what I'm going to do is do a dry fit. And I am just going to see how it fits together without gluing it, to see if there's any gotchas or areas of concern. And it doesn't look like it. We've got spots for the arms, the torso. We can see where we're going to have to clean it up just a little bit there. You can see where those little white flecks are, and we'll clean those up. But now I get my glue. And remember, I said just a little bit will do you. The other thing too is, where do you put your glue down at? Where do you put the glue on the model? And putting the glue on your model, that's an important decision to make, because ultimately that can determine where it is. Now, I want to show you something. This just oozed out a bunch of glue. I'm at altitude where I live, and so if this is packaged at a lower altitude, the pressure differential will cause it to ooze out. No big deal. What you do want to do is not use your fingers, but you do want to wipe this up. Some people will wear gloves when they're working on the models, like doctor's gloves, dentist gloves, something like that, those nitrile gloves. I don't, maybe I should, but I don't. It's not necessary. I've been hobbying for a long time, and it's never hurt me not doing it. But clean off that surface area. Make sure you get it clean, because otherwise it'll be very hard to get the cap back on later. And I just use an old piece of paper towel that you might have around. And you can see what that tip looks like on there. Pretty small. The temptation is to put the glue on the peg, and I don't normally do that. I'll put it on the flat sides of this model here. So I'll try and use my X-Acto knife to show you where specifically. So I'll try and put it like right there, and I'll try and put it right there. And then I'll put some right around here and here. And I'll use the peg as a guide. So let me show you how I do this. So I just barely squeeze the bottle, just barely squeeze, and I just run it. And I just get enough glue that comes out the tip of the bottle, and then I use the tip of the bottle as almost an applicator to slide or position that glue around. Now, this is somewhat time sensitive. I mean, you don't have like 2 long minutes to do this, but you don't also have to rush or panic when you're doing this. So I've got that on there. I've already dry fit the piece. I've got a little bit of glue. I don't have much. In fact, you probably can't even see it, despite the fact that we're working with a fairly high definition camera here. And then I fit it together. And this glue doesn't take very long, but I'll hold it, probably like this, for about 10 or 15 seconds. And just allow it to set up and get tacky. And the thing that I'll also point out is, remember the mold lines I talked about that we're going to want to scrape off? That'll do, but I won't do that right away. What I'll do is I'll wait till the glue for it to solidify before I go ahead and set that up. So there you go. I think that's been about 15 seconds. So I set Daredevil over there, let him dry a little bit longer. And the other thing too, here's a little hobby tip. I just set the cap of the glue back on. I don't actually screw it down. Because I want to be able to get to it fairly quickly, and I'm not done using it yet, so just setting it on top should work. Next, I'm going to build on the legs. So the legs themselves, I put the flat side of the clippers against the bottom of the foot, the flat side of the clippers against the sprue itself, clip, and it's been removed. I'm going to do that again right here. Clip, and clip, and out it comes. Now, you might look at some of these models and you can see we've got this weird peg at the bottom of it. And that peg is part of the debris that Daredevil is standing on right over here. There's the temptation to clip, but I'm going to tell you, if you don't know where it goes, don't clip it until you figure it out. You can always clip it off later, but you can see there's an indentation that you're going to want to take advantage of. So just be mindful of that. Now, Daredevil's torso is drying, and last time I didn't actually clean any mold lines off because I wanted to glue it together. This time it's a little bit different. Because this is a little bit more fragile and less stable of a piece, I'm going to clean off the mold lines of the legs itself after I dry fit. So that looks pretty good. I don't see any big hiccups. But now I'm going to look for any sort of mold lines you might have. And you can see maybe there's a slight one right there on the top of the thigh, ever so small. So I take my scraper and I put it at about a 45-degree angle and I run it away from my body and I just apply light pressure and it just smooths down that mold line. Put the scraper at 45-degree angle to the model, scrape away from yourself, and you can see you get a little bit of this gray plastic that comes off, and you can just use your thumbnail, your index finger, and just kind of scrape off whatever comes up. Then I look and I say, okay, that's pretty clean. So that leg is done. I look at this leg and I can see that I've got a little bit on the bottom of the foot. So again, hold it at a 45. Scrape that off. Got a little bit of something on the rear end of her left leg, so I scrape that off. And the rest of it looks reasonably good. Now, this lower half comes in two pieces. We dry fit it, and that's good. Now, before we glue it onto the torso, because it's one big peg, we're going to put it together. So this case, you see that this is kind of a lock and key setting here, or not setting, but way that this is put together. So what I'll do is I'll put glue probably on the inside. I didn't put my cap on, just screw it on all the way. I just kept it on a little bit. And I just am going to put a touch of glue, not much. I'm going to hold it up so you can see how much glue I'm putting on here. You can see ever so slightly. If you gentle with squeezing it out, you can see it just start to come out of the tip of the bottle. You just get a little bit in there. I'd rather have too little and have to get some more than too much and have it oozing out everywhere, which will inevitably happen, and we'll talk about how to get that off there. But once you've got that glue on there, the next thing you're going to do, again, remember to cover up your bottle, is you'll take it and you'll fit it together and you hold it for about 15 seconds. And that'll be enough for it to kind of hold together on its own before you have to do anything. And then I start to kind of in this 15 seconds of downtime, I think about, all right, what's next on this model? And I think what's next for me is going to be the arms. And I'll look at the torso and get ready to put that together here. All right, so that's been about 15 seconds or so. No problems. If you had any excess glue that you need to take care of, you can just kind of run your index finger or your thumb over it. You could use a paper towel if you want, but I generally don't use the towel against the model because I don't want any of the tacky glue to pull the paper off. That kind of makes it a pain to clean up the model later. And I'm just going to set that over here. Now, let's talk about the arms. So again, we're going to go flush side of the clippers against the model, flush side of the clippers against the model, and that prevents you getting excess plastic remaining on it. So I've got one arm, I'm going to do two, but I'm not going to do cut any more out until I get these two pieces on. So they both come out. They're independent pieces, not real stable, so I don't want to put it on the arms with put it on the torso with super glue and then start cleaning because that'll cause them to break off. You want to treat that, watch those stress points. But I am going to run my mold line scraper, 45 degrees, and I'm just going to scrape that off, that little tag right off there. Sometimes you get a little bit on the little channel here, or the little key for the lock and key fit, and so you can scrape those too. Dry fit them always before you glue them because you want to make sure they fit on there correctly. If it's not fitting correctly, sometimes the model can be designed poorly, but generally speaking, I find if you're having to force something or there's a big gap, it means you got the wrong piece or you're assembling it the wrong way. So you want to watch that. All right, so I suspect our torso is suitably dry at this point. And again, we dry fit. Make sure they got it in there, no problem. I'm gonna just check the other arm real fast. Yep, not a problem with the fits. So let's go ahead and add just a touch of glue. I'm going to do this so you can see it. All right, there we are. Then I'm going to take the right arm, and I'm just going to plug it in there and hold it. Give that a good 15-second count. All right, that's dry enough. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Just a touch of glue. And we're going to plug this in. Some people will use accelerator for their models, and I don't think that that's a bad idea when you've got a very fiddly piece and you need to figure out a way to secure it. I think the accelerator makes the plastic bond, or at least in my opinion, makes the plastic bond a little bit more fragile. So I don't always use it. If I can get away with not using it, I won't. But that's just, I just wanted to throw that out there. All right, so we've got the arms. Looks like they're sticking on. Before I'm going to do the head, I'm going to go back to the legs again, give the feet just a moment longer to dry, cover up my glue. I'm going to clip out this base right here. So out it comes. Same procedure as before. We're just going to run our scraper tool over the top of it. Make sure there aren't any excessive mold lines, which I don't think there are. That looks pretty good. Now, this one is going to be particularly important for me to dry fit because I don't know how this went on. Oh, I see. He's actually stepping on the back of the stonework here. So now that we've got that figured out, get a touch of glue. Not too much. Little goes a long way. And then we're just going to put that foot right on there. And we're going to hold this. Make sure it sticks. If you ever get super glue stuck on your fingers, or maybe you get your fingers stuck together, a little nail polish remover will break loose that adhesion. But it's a pretty harsh chemical, so try not to use it, and it'll definitely wreck your clothes and things of that nature. So be real mindful about that. All right, I'm going to let that leg just hold tight there. Now we're going to go to the head. Now the head, we can use the clippers like we have been, but when you only have a single point on a sprue, you could just gently twist it off the sprue like this. But that tends to leave a little bit more debris, so you'll have to use your hobby knife to kind of scrape away the remainder of whatever comes off the sprue. Now, I do want to show you something. So you see in my left hand, I'm pinching the head between my thumb and index finger. My right hand, I'm holding the hobby knife like a pencil, and I'm cutting away from myself. Now, what you may have noticed is I've got my two other fingers, my middle finger and my ring finger on my left hand, and I'm pushing my pinky into those two fingers. And why am I doing that? Holding your hands together provides stability. So if you've got kind of shaky hands, this is a way to create stability. Otherwise, you've got a lot less control if you're trying to do it this way. And when using something like an X-Acto knife or a paintbrush, you're bound to cut something other than what you want to cut, or paint something other than what you want to paint. So I always recommend bracing your hands together. And when you brace your hands together, put your elbows on the table that you're working on and go across. All right, so Daredevil's head's cleaned up. I'm going to go over to the body, get my glue out. And we're just going to put a touch of glue down the neck. Not much. Cover it up. On goes the head. Almost. And now we got the head setting up here. And that'll cure pretty quickly here. But I'll put him down. I'll use gravity as my friend here to help kind of hold that in place. Maybe I'll use my clippers so that I can balance them upright. Or not. There we go. You can see that just will hold right there. Now, the sprue's empty. I throw these things away. I don't see any reason to keep them. Some people will clip them up in interesting shapes and use them for like debris on battlefield terrain pieces, whatever. I generally don't do a whole lot of that, so that'll just go in the trash pile. No need to keep it. But sometimes it's worth giving it a good look, making sure there isn't any leftover pieces you might want to use. Then we pick a base. And since Daredevil's base comes with some brickwork already on it, I'm looking for something that will match when I paint it up. So like, he's probably not going to be standing on these grates and having bricks on top of there. Maybe he is. You could put them on there. But I think since you're going to have a little brickwork, perhaps just going with a simpler base is appropriate. So I just clip that out. And then I'm just going to run my mold line tool, 45-degree angle against the flat of the surface. Get that little burr off there. So now that's ready to go. Now, next to last step for Daredevil. We dry fit them together, no problems. It goes on pretty cleanly, no guessing games there. Generally speaking, I like to put the glue inside the channel. I'm going to hold it upside down so the glue doesn't run out. And then I plug the legs in. And we're just going to hold that for a good 15 seconds. And then we just have to glue the model to the base. And then we're in a good spot for primer in this case. I think if there was some top 3 rules to come away from, one, it's always cut or scrape away from yourself so you don't get any nasty cuts or anything like I've got here on my thumb, although that's not from modeling miniatures, that's from removing a 3D print off of a print bed and cutting myself. And then a little bit of glue, not much, and then only clip out as many parts as you need immediately. That going beyond that will risk losing some stuff. So here we go. We're just going to put a touch of glue. Remember, I just get enough glue that it goes on the edge of my applicator here, and then I just run the applicator around the perimeter of what it is that I want to glue down. And voila. I'm just going to let that sit for 15 seconds. I will go ahead and screw this on because we're going to take a quick break before we dive into putting together Electra or the hand ninjas. But after about 15 seconds or so, you can see that Daredevil is complete on the base. He's ready for prime and then paint. So that is the Daredevil assembly with modeling tips associated with it. All right, from there we'll go on to Electra. Okay, now that Daredevil is complete, it's time to build Electra. Electra is a little bit more complicated of a model. So again, the same strategy applies. What are we going to build off of? So I'm looking for the most, I guess, complete component of this. So meaning when I put 2 pieces together, what's going to make up the vast majority of the model, in which I can hang all the other pieces on. And I think probably we're going to start with part 2 here, which is the majority of the body, and then I am going to probably put part 8 on there as well. So we'll get the majority of the torso and the legs. So we take our clippers, and you see we got this little piece of flash there. We can just pull that off. It comes off right easy. Put the flat of the clippers there, and that comes off. Flat of the clippers on the foot, that comes off. And then the back of the thigh, and that also comes off. So we'll set that sprue aside for just a moment. We'll get our scraper and just take a peek. Make sure we get any little mold lines off that might be hard to reach otherwise before we assemble. And there's one on the back of her elbow. And usually you can find most of these mold lines right around where they connect to the sprue. That's how kind of that injection plastic molding works. It squirts this plastic in there into the cavities of the mold, and where that mold comes together to create that pocket or for the shape of the item you're casting, that is, those little tiny seams are where you're going to see on the model. Okay, so that's pretty clean. Now this is a very peculiar model, so you can see this is the front half of her body and there's nothing on there. So we got to figure out how this leg attaches. And it looks like the leg probably, maybe it doesn't attach there actually. Oh, that's for the little side holster there. So we need one other piece, and that's going to be this little side, and that right there, me throwing my clippers, is why we don't clip out too many pieces at once, because you can lose them very easily. This one's a very delicate piece, so we'll dry fit it, and it just lays flush like that. All right, so not a problem. We'll get a little bit of glue. Get that all set in there. Sometimes you get just a touch too much glue like what I've got in there. So we will get a little piece of tissue and dab most of that out of there. In this case, I'm just going to use this Q-tip. You can see I took the majority of it out of there. And now we will not dry fit, but fit that piece right on there. I'm not going to worry about holding it too aggressively because it should just set up fine on its own with the weight of the component. So we'll leave that there. Now, if we're struggling a little bit and we want to print out the pictures, we can do that, or the instructions rather, or we could just set the picture out there as kind of a tip or a clue. And the next piece I'm going to clip out here is this part of the torso here, this chest piece that you can see that her arm pivots off of. I'm looking for any mold lines that need to be cared for. Nothing, one right there, just a little tiny bit. There we go, got that out of the way. Now remember what I said before about where we put our glue. And we're gonna put the glue, just squeeze a touch out on the end of the nozzle, and then just use the nozzle to spread the glue around. It's easier than just applying the glue directly on, because that's when you get too much glue on there. And for those keeping score at home, I didn't dry fit this piece, and I probably should have, but that's okay. Sometimes we inadvertently take a shortcut and get lucky. If it hadn't been, I would have pulled the part free and then dabbed it off with that Q-tip, and assuming I got the majority of the glue, I would just keep them separated. Otherwise, you can use some Uncure to keep it, to take the rest of it off there, or you can use fingernail polish remover, or maybe even some isopropyl alcohol. The higher the percentage, the more effective. So 99% is usually the best, and that'll take all that super glue off. Okay, and that's dry. Now with that being put into place, you can see that we've got the cavity for the leg, the piece that we originally clipped out. And this one is important to dry fit because it could go in there a lot of different ways, and we want to just get it lined up nicely because she's doing the side kick in her pose there. So we want to get that situated. Oh, now that we think we know the orientation, we'll just put a touch of glue in the cavity there. Maybe there's a little bit too much, we'll find out. I can always dab it off later if need be. I'm just gonna hold that in place. Once we got it in place, we can look at what we've got here, and it looks pretty good. I'm just going to run this Q-tip in there, make sure we get any excess glue off. And she's shaping it to be pretty dynamic. All right, I might next work on the head. So the head comes, I think, as part of, yep, right here, part of the arm that she's pivoting off of when she jumps. So we'll just clip that out there, the edges, set our sprue aside, work on taking any of these mold lines off. There's not too many that are on here. And you can see, so again, that's why we're careful about not clipping too much. You can see her face right there. And we will dry fit. You can see that you got this really unique cavity here where this is going to fit in pretty cleanly. So nothing too complex about that. What is interesting about these newer models and the way they slice them digitally versus the old handmade sculpts that were in pewter or even the plastics, you get some really interesting angles that are cut on these models that you wouldn't have seen historically. So sometimes it can be kind of hard to figure out how all this comes together. The faces can be separated from the tops of the heads or the back of the heads, in this case the top of the head. And we'll work on putting that piece in next. All right, so we'll sit down Electra. Remember, so there's the top of the head right there, and it's tethered by this. So I try and hold it by these fragile bits as close as I can to provide them a little extra structural integrity so they don't snap when clipping. And then we just ever so gently clip them. And there we go. And this one is going to go on pretty cleanly. I'm not going to worry about dry fitting it. And we'll just put a little bit of glue in the cavity, as we have been doing with both Shadowlands Daredevil and Electra. And we're just going to, oh, I'm sorry, actually. So here's a good example of a mistake here. We're not ready to put that on there. We got to put our hair on first. So I'm just going to clean that out real quick. And because we didn't use too much glue, we don't have to worry about that clogging up in there. And I am going to clip out her hair. And I would have been better served to dry fit that, but that's okay. Sometimes it's easy to make a mistake on these models, and I'm sorry about the jittery photo when I scrape these mold lines, but it's impossible to really hold it all still. Here. I will dry fit this, so you can see we've got a plug there. And I'm going to plug there. That doesn't fit that way, but it does fit this way. So that is good to know. We know the hair kind of flows down in this case, or raven black hair, and we'll just hold that for a moment as that sets. And it should set pretty quickly here. There we go. And now we're ready for the top of the cap. So we'll just repeat this process that we started, where we're just going to put a touch of glue inside of her little headband here. And she goes. And now I will take this Q-tip and I will run it over the front of her face just to make sure there isn't any excess glue. And the nice thing is you can use a Q-tip because we haven't put a ton of glue on there. If you really put a lot of glue on there, you risk getting Q-tip fibers on there, which isn't fun. Now we've got two pieces left. We got what looks like a sash or a shawl or something. It probably goes around her waist. So we'll clip these guys, clipping it flat side against the model piece. And just clean up that mold line. And this one's a little bit trickier because we're not exactly sure where this goes. I'm guessing it goes around her waistband somewhere. Okay, so you can see right there, we got a nice close-up. There's a little notch at the bottom of the model, and there's a little notch. Move my hand so we get a little inside there. And that's where that's going to fit. You want to put that notch in there. So I'm just going to dry fit this real quick. I want to feel real comfortable about that. And it just kind of lays up under between her legs there, just like that. So, not going to get super crazy with the glue here. We don't want to overdo it. But I'll put a little bit between her legs and kind of right there on the front of her tummy. And we will just tap that sucker in there. And it looks like we've got that nice and secured for you to look at. That should glue here pretty quickly. And then we're down to our final piece, which is this piece of rubble that she's jumping off of that looks like it's got some shurikens stuck into it. That's somebody who really knows how to throw a ninja star if they can stick a shuriken into the cement there. And it's her hand that's planting off, so we'll have to take a look and see where her hand goes. It looks like it might go on the top of the model. So this is going to be a real delicate fit here. I think something like that. All right, so we're going to get some glue. This one you're going to want to be really patient on because there isn't any real like key and lock tabs to build the model off of. So you're just going to want to make sure you rest it as best you can. And it's going to be really tempting to put a lot of glue on there, but you don't want to do that because you'll end up gluing your finger to it. And the nice thing about working with these plastics is, generally speaking, you can do more dynamic poses like this because the joint here that we're gluing can support the weight of the plastic model, where with pewter models that wasn't the case. Even resin models were not always the case. And this one, we'll see. This might take on the first go and it might not. So let it dry. This could also be time for some accelerator. The glue is a little bit tacky. So when you get kind of this situation where it's taken a little bit longer to dry, you can get some accelerator. And this stuff, as I just called it, will help you with the bond pretty quickly. So you want to position this model so you're holding it with one hand or get somebody to help you. And then you've got the glue in there. And you don't need a lot of this stuff. Just need a little bit. And it creates a chemical reaction that instantly hardens that that super glued bond. And you can see there's Electra now adhered to it. This stuff can take a little bit of time to dry, so I'll often just run my Q-tip over it, especially if I think I'm going to be priming it pretty quickly. And just try and dab up the vast majority of this. All right, there she is. She is now on the base. And I'm just going to put a little glue around the edges. Remember, just get a bit on your nozzle. Then you can just kind of pull it around, make sure you cover everything. And on it goes. I'll just hold it there for a second. If I'm holding it there, let me get this out of the the frame. This is kind of what Accelerator looks like. I bought mine from a local hobby store here in the Colorado area. It's just called InstaSet. You can get it at most hobby stores, some game stores. Probably buy it on Amazon. Not too expensive. I don't know, $8-10, somewhere in that ballpark. And it can help make your life easy. Just bear in mind that when you apply the accelerator to the glue, it creates a chemical reaction. Chemical reactions create heat, and so it can get hot. And if you've got it super glue on your fingers, it will make hot super glue on your fingers, which, you know, won't send you to the emergency room, but isn't a lot of fun. And as always, be careful around your eyes and mouth and whatnot. If you're a youngster, just note that. There we are. There's Elektra. She's done next to Daredevil. And I think the last thing we'll do are the hand ninjas. There you go. All right, I'm taking a look at the hand ninjas. What I'm going to start with is the base. This has a very large smoke and terrain feature that needs to fit on the base. And I think that's going to be important to make sure we get the right fit, because the other three models build on top of that. It looks like we've got one ninja on the smoke and then two ninjas actually nesting off of him as well. Sorry about that. I had that little off on the picture there. So I want to get that right. I have these two bases, I think, came with the sprue originally, and both of them have this raised area on them. And I don't know how well it's going to fit. I think certainly we could make that work when you get fiddling with it a little bit. So you've got this. That'd work just fine. You can make that work. There's a little bit of overlap. This one's a little bit more difficult, depending on how you fit it in here. You could have some overhang, which I don't love. So I'm going to set that one aside for sure. But this one right here fits on cleanly, and it's an extra base. Like I said, Atomic Mass Games is pretty generous when it comes to providing you with extra bases. And so if you've got the opportunity, make sure you pick a base that is good and worth using there. A little bit of what looks like some plastic bits from clipping it off the sprue. So I'm just going to, a little bit more in the mold line, so I'm going to use my X-Acto knife and take it away. And then I'm going to put this guy on here. So I get my super glue out. Same technique as before. I'm going to focus more on just getting some super glue on the end of the nozzle and then dragging it across. It's kind of the best way to control the amount of glue that you get on there. And once you've got that done, looks like we've got it complete there. We're just going to position it over the top of the base. And there we go. That should be adequate to let it set up and dry. So we'll set that guy to the side for now. Looking at the sprue and the artwork here, I'm going to start with this lower hand ninja and build off of that. So this lower hand ninja is the one with this spear-looking ninja weapon and with his arms up in the air. And so I believe it's going to be that model right there. There's the chest, torso, the arms raised up. And we've got one of the legs, two of the legs. So we're going to start there. And we'll start with the torso because that's the main component. So flush side against the plastic. There we go. Comes out nicely, cleanly. Doesn't look like there's too many odd parts on this. I'm going to get my mold line scraper. Make sure I just get off any sort of unclean areas. These look like they're coming out pretty nicely. And there we go. So I mentioned before, I'm going to focus on gluing around the edges of the model, and I'm not so much going to put it in where that peg will go. because I like to use that as kind of the guide and line everything else up. Sometimes if those pegs aren't completely clean or you fill them with glue, it can be really hard to make sure that everything seats flush appropriately. And for these plastic models, just kind of glue around the seams is more than adequate. And there we go. Easy peasy. That goes through. Next, let's take a look at the legs here. So we'll clip those out. There's 1, 2. Cut them so that they're flush. I've got that out of the way. We'll set the sprue to the side. And the same process as before. So this kit, where would I rate it on the difficulty level of putting it together? You know, I think it's a little bit more challenging than some of the others that have been out there. Certainly not the hardest I've put together. I think the Weird Miniatures Malifaux line of figures can be the most challenging to put together. They're very rewarding, though. I want to be very clear about that. So don't assume just because they're challenging that it's not worth doing. I just want to make sure, just trying to put it in comparison here. All right, so the first one, and I'm kind of dry fitting these together. We've got this leg, and you know, that little groove or hole right there, I'm guessing is for the ninja to be jumping off of. But we'll get that figured out here as we move along. So get a little bit of glue in the gap. Put some glue in that gap. Position this leg in here, like so. And there we go. And then we will position the other leg in. Don't sweat it if they fall out like that. It's not the end of the world. Glue is still plenty tacky to set up. And if you're really worried about it, just glue one leg at a time. Don't rush it like I did there, where you put glue in both gaps. You can just let it go. And this guy should be good to just kind of let dry here. I don't think we have to apply a whole lot of overt pressure. We can just let it kind of set up on its own here. And we'll put that aside for just a moment. Now we'll get the arms put together. It looks like both of the hands are positioned towards the base of this staff spear type item. And you'll notice I clipped at the edges, the farthest most edges first down here and here, because I didn't want to put strain by clipping this and maybe getting it to break down the middle on these very fine pieces. You want to just use your fingers to kind of provide some structural support to these plastic pieces, especially if it's more brittle plastic, because if you clip in the middle, it can cause it to break, which you can fix with glue. It's not the end of the world, but it is something to think about. So it looks like, for the most part, you've got a little lock and key area, right, in those. So that's probably the best anchor point you've got, and then you can get that glued. You apply glue to both of these, but get this one situated first, and then we can situate the other hand. And this is one that I'd recommend putting glue on both joints at the same time, since it's one connected piece. A little bit of glue will go a long ways, that's for sure. And there we go. And you can see we are situated. Just took a minor adjustment for that to set up. And we can let that dry. And we'll go ahead and we'll get the head put on this model. Moving on to the head. I think the head that we're looking for is right down here. So we'll clip that guy out. And so far, this 3-part model has been relatively reasonable to put together. I haven't been disappointed in what they've produced, and there's some good attachment points for it, but we'll see as we build this guy up a little bit. I'll probably end up assembling all 3 hand hinges and connecting them first and then connecting them to the base, as that the base looks like it's going to be the most delicate part, and so I'd rather put the work into getting the rest of this put together. So we're just going to put a little bit of glue in this channel. Not a whole lot. It's a little bit tricky, and maybe I should have put the head on before the arms, but that's okay. We can work around it. And the head is now attached. So 1 ninja down. Next ninja, let's do the one with the chain. That looks pretty cool. Alrighty, I presume the one with the chain is going to be these pieces right here. So we'll work there. Again, I'm going to work off the body so that I can build everything else out here. This piece is on the sprue in a pretty reasonable fashion, so I'm not worried about breaking anything. I will give it a once over for some mold lines, which we've got just a couple. There we go. Cool. And then we'll do the same thing with this piece right here. See if we've got anything egregious. Just looks like the bottom of the tunic itself. And then, as I've mentioned before, glue around the edges, just enough to not sop the figure in glue, but rather just get a thin layer. Super glue is one of these things that if you put a big glob of it on there, it just takes longer to dry and it's harder to manage and it gets everywhere. And on miniatures, it covers up the details of what you're trying to do. And so it's less is more. Less is really more. And if you feel like you've got a little bit of excess glue, you can just quickly wipe it off there. There we go. We got the torso. That should set up just fine. Next, we will get the legs put on the miniature. You know, thinking about that last hand ninja, it definitely wasn't obviously too tricky to get the head in there. But when you've got an overhead pose like he did with that staff, or that spear type item, it's better to, you know, it's easier to maneuver around it when it's not directly overhead. This one's got a little bit more mold lines. So I probably should have put the head on first, and I suspect if I went to the website and looked at the Atomic Mass Games directions, they would tell you to do just that. But it's not the end of the world, as you saw. You can always take care of business. You know, I have had some people ask me, newer modelers in general, when you're putting stuff together, if you super glue something, what and you don't like it, what are your options? Well, there is something called uncure that you can use. And uncure breaks down the bond of the model. You can use fingernail polish or isopropyl alcohol, like that 99%. I haven't used isopropyl directly myself, but it's best just to do dry fits if you can. Now, one thing that you will see on occasion is you will see plastic glue, which is different than super glue. And plastic glue breaks down the chemical bonds of the parts and actually kind of quote-unquote welds them together. So you really want to be careful with that, because there is no undoing that once you put that together. Unlike super glue, where you can get it to kind of come apart with these various different techniques and products. So if you're going to use plastic glue, it's great for the security. It is tough for the oops factor if you've messed something up. All right, we are going to do the head next. The head has got some tiny mold lines on there, not too bad. So we'll just kind of run them over real quickly here. And put a little bit of glue in the channel. these together. I really like what Atomic Mass is doing with their miniatures. They do such a good job with these dynamic poses. I really feel like in many ways, if you're just getting into this hobby, there is some really, really cool models out there. Much more dynamic poses with this new digital design elements of these figures. So you're spoiled for choices when compared to what I had to put together years and years ago. Although cool at the time, certainly not in the same boat. All right, and we're gonna just put this arm on here real quick. Just a little bit of glue. You can see this time I put on more of the lock, not the key or the channel, the peg, and that fits in just like that. So we're good. We've got a little bit of a seam at the top of the shoulder. We can use a little bit of modeling putty or green stuff to fill that in. It can be tempting to use thick super glue, but I think that's less controllable. And so we'll probably do a little bit there, but after you prime it, it'll be pretty hard to see. And if you use like a modeling putty, you won't be able to see it at all. So it'll be really good. All right, this is an important part right here. So you've got a very complex chain. You can see it's three-dimensional. And you can see it's already broken on the sprue. I didn't do anything. It's just broken. So I'm gonna have to fix that myself, which is manageable. Is it a bummer? Sure. Can we fix it? Yep, we can. Now, you'll notice if you clip it right here at this point, you likely would break the chain anyways if you didn't hold on to it while you were clipping it. And so you definitely want to start at the ends. But in this case, we're already busted with the tension. So this is a good opportunity to show you how to manage that. So I'm just going to clip off the back side there, and I am going to clip that out, and there you go. We got part one. That's fine. Now we're going to go with part two, and I'll start with this little piece right there, and we will clip out the hand ever so gently. And there we go. Set the sprue aside. I just want to make sure that the hand is cleanly removed. We got a little bit of flash on the end of the weight you can see here, so we'll just take that off. It's not too hard. You run your finger over it. Yeah, and unfortunately, sometimes these models are just fragile and they break. It's not the end of the world. It can be disappointing, but it's just kind of the way this hobby works. And so you just kind of manage it. So here's how I'm going to approach this. I am going to I'm going to glue these pieces into place, and then I'll do a little dab of glue on the chain to hold it together. All right, so that dry fits pretty cleanly in there. A little dab of glue. And we are going to get the hand situated here. There's not a big component to hold on to. You're kind of flush fitting the hand here. So we're just gonna hold that for a moment. And sorry about that. I got out of the viewing screen. So there we go. We got them in there. Now we're going to do the same thing with the hand here. And it looks like the hand goes like this. And you can see the chains are absolutely nowhere near each other, but we'll fix that. Don't worry. All right, so I'll apply a little bit of glue to the back of this hand. And the important part here is to get the hand on and dry and stable. Then we can worry about the chain. The chain is easy to flex around ever so delicately. So we might just need a touch more glue there. That's okay. It's better to underglue than to overglue. There we go. If you ever get broken pieces on your model that are not repairable for whatever reason, usually companies are very good at sending you replacement parts after you get them a picture of what's going on. And in today's day and age, you know, digital cameras and photos and whatnot are almost instantaneous relief, where before it was just a little bit more difficult to kind of make that happen. Since this is a fragile bond, I'm just going to hit it with a little bit of accelerator to help move along the curing process. And then you can see we got the chain that's broken right there. So let's go ahead and hit it with just a touch of glue. And for the most part, it will be transparent to most folks. Now, would you use this in like a Games Workshop Golden Demon display type setting? Probably not. You wouldn't want the slight joint to draw some negative attention, but for tabletop quality, this will be all right. And we're just going to hold that for a second there. Let that set up. This might be one to hit with some accelerator if need be. We can blow on it just a touch to help it get to where it needs to be. I'm going to get a free hand available to do that. So just 1 second. Okay, there it is. I use a little bit of accelerator. You may be able to see the shine on it. I had to kind of get a hand free and position this guy a little funny, but he's put together and he's looking pretty reasonable. And we do know from the box art that he is jumping off this left side of our hand ninja here, which I think goes right in this thigh peg here. So we'll go ahead and glue that into place, which is a really, really cool pose. I can't even imagine what that would be like. Seeing those guys jump out of the smoke at you category. It's absolutely like those old classic kung fu movies. I'm just going to put a little glue right there. Hold it in place. And there we go. We'll set him down, let them dry. All right, on to the last hand ninja. Same process as before. We're gonna clip out the center torso here. One piece down, 2 pieces to go. So again, if you're new to the hobby, one of the things that you're gonna wanna do after you get these assembled is you're gonna wanna prime them. You know, make sure that if you've got any accelerator on them, you go over them with like maybe gently with a small sponge or a paper towel with some water, and just make sure you get the accelerator off. You want the primer to bond directly to the model itself and not have any sort of chemical barriers in between if you can avoid it. So that's, you know, it's always good to kind of make sure your sprues are clean, your models are clean. And then you're going to prime it. So there's a lot about priming, and we could do a whole separate video on this. But the short version is you've got some options. You can prime it in white, black, gray. You can do a color primer. There's some color primers out there. You can use some simple primers that you can get from Home Depot to prime these guys up. You could get, as long as it's kind of the matte black, and they're not too overly expensive. Or you can go with something like an Army Painter or a Games Workshop. Both are great products. They're more costly, I think, overall, relative to, say, going to your local hardware store and picking up the primers. But I think they're worth it. They're not a bad product. But the point is you've got options, and you know, find one that works for your budget. You can even use an airbrush if you've got access to one of those and some of their surface primer. If you don't have an airbrush but you've got surface primer, you could paint that on. There's a whole host of different options available to you. You'll notice I'm not using a mold line scraper. You can also use an X-Acto knife. You get a nice good 90-degree angle with the X-Acto knife because you don't want to dig gouges out, just to remove these mold lines. So I just hold it like this, parallel to the model. And you always want to go away from yourself when you're using something sharp like this. All right, now let's just do a quick dry fit and see how this all fits together. That looks like it goes right there. Nice plug for us to use. Makes building this model a lot easier. So some people also find this part of the hobby to be tedious. They don't enjoy building or painting models. I think this is one of the greatest things to take your mind off of everyday stresses and strains, whether it's work or school or whatever you got going on. I love doing this. I'll often listen to audiobooks, or I believe it or not, I listen to a lot of TV programs as they're on, and I pause if I need to watch what's going on, but that's what I do in the downtime. Some people just listen to music and rock out to their favorite bands, but whatever you do, I find this to be a great area of focus. All right, there we go. We got the legs. Let's do the head. Then we'll be on to the arms and done. There's the head. Clean off the mold lines before I put them on there to the best of my ability. Usually just a quick scrape will do. If you're working with an older pewter model, you oftentimes will have to use files. Files work great for soft metals. Plastic models don't hold up so well to a file, so I wouldn't recommend using hobby files on them unless you've got a really hard surface for whatever reason. But I don't use them unless I'm working on pewter models, which anymore you don't find. Gosh, I can't think of the last time I bought a pewter model. Maybe some of the smaller game companies out there. Real quick, clipping this sword out. I'm not going to start in that middle one because I don't want to put any tension on that blade. So I'm going to start here at the arm, then I'm going to move down to the katana, and then I'll move into the middle. Otherwise, you can end up with that chain situation again where you're trying to repair the broken chain. You could be trying to glue back together a very delicate sword, which is doable but not fun, as we saw. All right, a little glue on the arm joint here, not too much, just enough. Get the arm put on. And that'll set up here pretty quick. Again, if you want, if you're trying to move with some sense of speed, you could hit it with a little bit of accelerator, and that'll move it up quick. The one thing you do want to watch out for is accelerator. You don't want to get it onto a piece that you're going to apply glue to immediately, because obviously that's going to cause your model to instantly cure. So there, we're just going to clean that off, make sure we're good and there aren't any problems. Now what you could do though is you could apply some accelerator to the other pieces that you're going to be putting on, and when they touch they'll bond very quickly. I don't often do that, but that's what I ended up doing with the chain when I knew I had kind of a delicate connection and I needed to move sure-footedly and make sure I got a good strong bond. Okay. Now, if you end up getting maybe too much glue, or maybe your fingers stick to the model, a little bit and you get a little bit of a fingerprint, what you can do is after that bond dries, you can go through there with that mold line scraper or your X-Acto knife, and you can just scrape away at that excess bond, and that's not a problem. So you can just go kind of work off some of that glue, and it's not too big a deal. I always just try and wipe off the excess accelerator to see what I'm dealing with. It'll dry eventually. It's not like an oil that'll be around for an indefinite period of time. But all right, now we need to attach this guy to the other ninja, and he's kind of leaping forward to some extent, and I think it is, let's see where that connection point is. Oh, it's on. Okay, so after just looking at this a little bit closer, he actually connects right there on his belt. Let's see, that little tab goes right there. So we'll add some glue. I'm just going to run it along this piece right here because it's all going to be flush on the other ninja. And we're just going to set that on there just like that. There we go. Jumping off the sash. And then the last bit is the smoke here. And that piece is going to plug in right there, and that's where he's gonna rest his leg. So I will put just a little bit of glue in here, not too much. Find that little peg, and then I'm going to work his leg in just like so. And the one nice thing about having the smoke on the base already is it gives you a little bit larger structure to hold on to. All right, so that is almost done curing. I'm going to hit it with just a touch of accelerator to help move that along. And here we go. So we have got the hand ninjas put together. And they are looking, I think, pretty dang good. So thanks for sticking with me on this hobby video. I know that a couple times I had the models out of the shot, but I hope you can forgive that, and I'll work on improving that a little bit. I think we got to see kind of a real world, what happens if you see a piece break, or how do you re-glue something, or how do you keep from losing your pieces for your model by only clipping a few things at a time. Certainly there's a lot more tips and techniques that we can go over, and I'm happy to dive into that. Please, if you've got any questions for me, put it in the comments below. But I enjoyed this little hobby project with you, and if you've got other hobby questions, let me know. Otherwise, if you like what I'm doing, please subscribe, like, hit the bell if you want to follow me, and I will see you soon. All right, thanks everybody, and happy gaming.